Aisha, I also think that in large sections of Western media, for example, the way Khalistani sympathizer Amritpal Singh, who was on the run, he was somebody I personally tailed, and I think Puneet makes this point about the corrosion of gurdwaras when he eventually gets taken into custody. It's after he does his little moment commemorating Bhindranwale, right? And the Western coverage of him was almost in large sections of the Western media romanticized, right? And it's annoying, it's grating. I routinely get targeted by the right wing in India as well as by the left wing because I decide my position on issues, and on this issue, I believed that there was no romanticization that was legitimate. This man was trying to set up an armed militia. He released pictures of himself. He modeled himself on Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. But if you saw how the sort of progressive media covered him, that's not necessarily what came across. The focus was almost more on internet shutdowns and on what this man stood for. Is that part of the problem in the way this issue is being understood in Western nations?
To some extent, I think yes. The answer would be yes, but I would be careful not to take it too far. You know what I mean? Remember the time, of course, when we did see that ridiculous advertisement on in New York's Times Square with Amritpal Singh, and it was just like, wait, what is going on here? But again, in one of the issues here is that there are certain elements, in the U.S., in Canada, in Western countries who will use free speech as just a method to deploy and sort of promote their propaganda. And it's sort of a veneer, right? They use the Western laws, they use the freedom that these countries afford to be able to push that. Now, a very different thing happens, of course, in India, where, and I just want to go back to also this whole Bhindranwale thing. I mean, Bhindranwale, there are posters of Bhindranwale outside Golden Temple. I mean, I've been there. I mean, it's not something that is terribly, shocking, to be honest. I mean,
Because it's become so common. I mean, I think
right.
the point made is that before the 80s, that wasn't the case.
Correct. And one could sympathize or something, but the problem is when it becomes an overt call for violence, right? And
Yeah.
when you start again using separatism. But Punjab relatively has been peaceful. Of course, there are people like Amritpal Singh, but they're not the majority. I mean, you don't see Punjabis rising up and saying that they want Khalistan. This is happening more in the international diaspora, and I think that's because of groups that tend to use free speech provided to them in these Western countries as a medium to push their venomous sort of ideologies, right?
I think
that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. That this is not just global. It is diaspora. It is outside
Correct.
of India.
Correct.
It's outside of India. I do need to take last comments. Ambassador Sinha, one prescriptive advice to the government at this point?
I think we should take Canada to the various forums that exist that we are both members of. For example, there is the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, where Pakistan was grey listed some time back. We should take this evidence and go there and ask for Canada to be grey listed. Or, for example, the Security Council, where sanctions can be imposed on countries. We should take this evidence and start a campaign against Canada. Canada cannot go around pretending to be a holier than thou country where there is freedom of speech when it is actually promoting violence and terrorism. And it must pay the price for that. If these various factions in Canada are so powerful as to be able to blackmail the government, then the government must pay the price that other terrorist governments like Pakistan have paid for the support of terrorism.
Puneet, what would you suggest as next steps?
No, I think words are cheap. They just say we will do this. Their relationship, like I am a student of terrorism. And you just have to set a deterrent. Like this is when you don't set a deterrent, it's not like somebody's pickpocketing and you said, we will do something and I'm very hurt. That person will embolden. And this is what we have seen since Kisan Andolan. They are being emboldened to, more and more outrageous acts. And you stop it is basically, this is 101 of policing. You set an effective deterrent. And they are not able to set that. You have to proscribe the WSO, the World Sick Organization, which is all doing this, or degrade the diplomatic relations from High Commissioner level to Charge Affairs level. There are so many tools. But they will just give statements and the media will run it and something. They don't know how to work with terrorism. I'm sorry.
Aisha, we've all spoken about Canada. You live and work in the United States of America. Let's talk for 2 minutes about what's happened in San Francisco.
Right. Before I just get to that, I wanted to say that one action that could be taken is, yes, public condemnation. But if the prime minister sent out, a message in public, or directly spoke to Justin Trudeau, which I think he should do, these are concrete steps. I mean, these days social media has a lot of influence. A couple of strong tweets coming from the government of India directed to the Trudeau government could set things in motion, right?
Yeah.
So that's just my thought on what action could be taken. I think expelling diplomats right away is is a little bit harsh. But of course, we've got to see them take steps before anything terrible happens. Before July 8th. And if they don't do that, then that could be a step.
And just for context to our audience, July 8th is when these groups have threatened to hold their rally, which they called a so-called freedom rally. Quickly, Aisha, I've got to give the last word to Terry.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The attack on the consulate in San Francisco is terrifying. It's despicable. It's horrific. I mean, this is an attack on India again. I mean, setting fire to a consulate is almost an act of, they say it's arson, it's vandalism, but thankfully nobody got hurt in this process, or because it could have been an act of terrorism. I think this is not going to again end here. There could be other episodes like this, and one has to be really, really careful about how India proceeds with the United States and the UK. But they have to be very firm that such actions are unacceptable. You cannot target diplomats of any country, India, of course, but you cannot target diplomats. That is crossing the line. It's absolutely unacceptable conduct.
Yeah.
And this is violence, and people could get killed.
Yeah. Terry, you said this could be an inflection point. You've been seeing this for decades. Why might this be an inflection point?
Well, we're about to find out, aren't we? I agree that we should not start recommending that India banish Canadian diplomats. I would advise, wait until we see whether the Liberal government makes so many other incidents before. Wait and see what happens. Are they really going to go through with this march to the Toronto consulate? And are they, in the name of this jihad against Indian diplomats? Traditionally, what happens in Canada is that that's a municipal decision. That's for the mayor and the council to give a permit for the march. Wrong. Geneva Convention says this is a federal responsibility. The protection of foreign assets, diplomatic premises, that is a federal responsibility. Now, let's see if the Trudeau government has the guts to say, for the first time, we're not going to have this. We are not going to allow people to rally with this sort of purpose. You cannot paint targets on the backs of any diplomats from any country, and we are going to call upon the Mayor and Council of Toronto to disallow such a rally. Now, that would be actually doing something, not just rhetorical, right? Let's see if they have the guts to do that or anything close to that. And then, I would say, start punishing Canada after Canada does something wrong. Just wait and see. Just wait and see.